Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to talk about something that affects a lot of people every single year, myself included, multiple times, and that is hurricanes, a natural disaster that springs up for the most part in the Gulf of Mexico. It'll come out of nowhere in the Indian Ocean, I believe, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, but in my case, and whenever I get affected, it usually just comes from the Gulf of Mexico or maybe the Atlantic Ocean. And it's just a big, massive storms that just come, they form, get really, really strong, and they just wreak havoc everywhere it goes. And it's something that, again, affects people every single year. They take a long time recovering from it, depending on how severe the damages are. And it goes from, there's many levels to it. But before I go into it, I just wanted to say definitely subscribe if you are new, like this video if you like it, and comment in the comment section down below. Tell me if you're a person who gets affected by hurricanes every once in a while. I would definitely like to hear some of your stories. So me being in Louisiana, we get a lot of hurricanes from, I say a lot, but we get hurricanes from time to time whenever they hit us. And we've had some major ones also, namely Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Ida in 2005 and 2021 respectively, at least in New Orleans area. There's some other ones like Hurricane Betsy way back in like 1969. There was Hurricane Laura in 2020 that hit the Lake Charles area. And these are the only ones that's popping in my head right now. There's a lot of other hurricanes that weren't as massive in those hurricanes. But the main ones I really wanted to talk about was just Katrina and Ida because it kind of hit very close to home. But I did want to talk about my personal experiences with both of them. So I'll start with Hurricane Katrina because it wasn't nearly as I don't remember it as much. Now, if you want to find like all the details and the facts of the situation and all that type of stuff, I definitely encourage you to do your own research. You can look up a lot of different YouTube videos. There's documentaries on it, all that type of stuff. So I would definitely highly recommend you doing that. But for me, Hurricane Katrina, I was only 9 years old. I was going into the 4th grade when this happened. So again, the thing that I really remember the most is just being like a lot of other people. You evacuate to Houston when there's a massive hurricane that's going right towards you. And I think I was in Houston for about a month. It was a while because, again, the hurricane had to actually happen. And then, obviously, there was all the massive damage that happened and everything like that. And the main thing about Hurricane Katrina that made it the most dangerous was not the fact that it was just a Category 5 and whatnot. It was, even though that was definitely one big thing, it was the fact that it was a couple levees, but mainly one of them. One of the levees was it didn't really have the best foundation, and so the levee broke. And basically what a levee is, it's a barrier that prevents a body of water of some sort to overflow and get to the other side and flood land and everything like that. We have a ton around where I'm at. Yeah, it's pretty much everywhere. You have to have levees to block the Mississippi River from flooding everything in its path down here. That's just how it is. We're that close to the Mississippi. We're that close to the Gulf of Mexico, really. So that's basically in essence what a levee is, and that was the main reason why Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans especially, but especially the surrounding areas of New Orleans. And it wasn't just New Orleans. New Orleans is the biggest city that was hit. What was the most hit was Gulfport, which is right in Mississippi, like not even an hour past the state line. That was just completely destroyed, mainly by wind damage. The winds were just super exhausting. It was well over like 120 or like 150 miles an hour or something like that. It was insanity whenever it finally hit land and hit Gulfport. It just took everything in its path. But and that's what happened. And that's because it was on the east side of the hurricane. The eye of the storm hit the state line. So, excuse me. So New Orleans is on the west side, which usually is the rainier part, I guess. but because of the levees breaking, that's why you see all the devastation, you see all the floods and all that type of stuff. Before I go further, real quick, I just wanted to say is that there's many different levels to a hurricane. There's like a tropical low, a tropical depression, something along those lines. Then there's a tropical storm. Then there's a category 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 being the hardest hitting, the deadliest, all that type of stuff. And it always depends on the gust, the winds, the miles per hour, not necessarily how fast it's moving, but it's mainly really the wind. If you just to make it as simple as I can make it, all right. Again, if you want to learn more about hurricanes and natural disasters, definitely do your own research and look it up on your own. But Hurricane Katrina. During that time, again, 9 years old, being in Texas, I do remember going to a Houston Astros game one night, which was pretty awesome, which ended up being the year they went to their first ever World Series, which was pretty nice to kind of think about. But again, just being away from home for so long, and as a kid, you don't really realize exactly what's going on. I knew there was a massive hurricane, but I didn't know exactly how devastating it was, how it would change people's lives, all that type of stuff. So being a 9-year-old going through that, it really, I think about it now, and I'm kind of surprised on how I handled it personally, because I used to freak out, and to an extent, I kind of still do with the littlest things, but I used to freak out a lot and worry so much when I was a kid. And just going through that, I don't really remember that going on or even really asking many questions. I think I just had the baseline understanding that there was a massive hurricane that hit through and it wasn't safe to go back yet. It wasn't good to go back because there was a lot of cleanup that needed to happen. There was obviously no electricity for about over a month probably. And just had to kind of wait it out until you get your electricity back. And that's mainly what happened. And then the other thing I did want to touch up on was the fact that after I got back to school, there was a lot of kids who didn't even go back to school for a while longer, even after school started again, because again, they were still out of town due to the hurricane, not being able to move back home, all that type of stuff. And then another thing that is still very unique to me is the fact that there was a lot of kids who lived in the city especially, but moved out to the area I was at to finish that school year. Because again, most of New Orleans being flooded, there was so much flood damage and everything like that, a lot of stuff was closed for a long, long time, including schools. So kids had to go to school elsewhere to finish up that school year. I do remember a couple of the kids that I interacted with that was from New Orleans and everything like that. There was this one particular kid who was a dude. He was I'm telling you, he was about 6 foot in the 4th grade. Again, 4th grader here, true 4th grader. It felt like he was 6 feet in the 4th grade. I remember him. We actually played rec basketball with him for 1 year. And we utterly dominated every single team because we would basically just lob it up to him, and he was able to dunk it probably because we were 9 years old. So they attached like a kiddie backboard, quote unquote, to the real backboard on a basketball court. He was probably able to dunk on that, but he was just too nice to do it, I think. So he didn't want to break it or something. So that's kind of what happened, and we ended up just sweeping everyone, winning the championship in rec basketball. I'll always remember that. And he was a really nice kid. I do remember he was extremely nice, extremely respectful. Definitely protected me when I was being bullied, even though a lot of the times I deserved it. But that's another subject for another day. And then and it's funny how it impacted him because I actually ran into him while I was at school at LSU, and he actually played college basketball for LSU for a couple years, and he actually recognized me. I didn't even recognize him. He recognized me, and we were actually talking for a good bit, reminiscing on those times, and then just saying what he's up to and all this type of stuff. Unfortunately, I don't think he ever made it into the NBA, but I was really glad to run into him, and it definitely it definitely touched me, and affected me that he actually remembered me from all that time ago. So that was really unique and something I'll never forget. But going on the flip side, from Hurricane Katrina, the damage that my parents sustained from the house was actually very minor, for the most part. The main thing is that there were some gutters that was affected. We lost a few shingles, I believe, but nothing too major. Even though if you lose all your shingles, then it's really bad. But there was some kind of holes that were created. I'm trying to think of exactly what it's called, but it wasn't even on the roof. It was on the part that's attached to that's connecting the gutter and the roof. I don't know how to explain it, but my main point is that there was a hole in one of those parts, and it was so small, no one like you couldn't really see it, but squirrels, because I lived basically in the middle of a forest at that time, squirrels would actually crawl up onto the house into that area where there were holes and then scratch a bigger hole for them to go into, which actually led them to the attic, the upstairs attic, which was not fun because they would actually you could actually hear them through the ceiling just crawling around, scratching at stuff, everything like that. It was super annoying, and it actually happened for a couple years before we finally were able to close up those holes and just close it up for good and seal it up, all that type of stuff. But I would be up at like 12 midnight because squirrels were like having a little party up there scratching up everything. That was just not fun at all. So that was really it about Hurricane Katrina. Now, Hurricane Ida. Oh man, there's a lot about this. I'm already at the 12 and a half minute mark. So Hurricane Ida, basically, it actually hit a lot closer to my specific neck of the woods than Hurricane Katrina ever did. And the worst part is that it hit west of us, which made it worse because that made it to where we were at the east side of the storm where there was a lot more wind damage. And so we evacuated this time to Florida, which ended up not being the best idea, Pensacola exactly, because Ida, like the very, very end part of Ida still hit Pensacola, which was kind of annoying, but whatever. It was only for like an hour, I think, to be fair. But still, it was like, really, we evacuated Ida, but we still get hit. Nice. Anyway, we were gone for about 2 weeks, and then we're out of state for 2 weeks. We actually went back in Louisiana, but we stayed somewhere else for another week because my grandfather actually got power pretty quick after the storm, because his area wasn't really hit that hard. So we went back there for a week. Our specific neck of the woods got power a little bit over 3 weeks, I believe. After the storm, we got our internet another 2 weeks after, which is pretty annoying, as you might imagine, especially in the world of technology that we live in. And so the only real damage we had to the house was basically we had, so kind of like a little backtrack. We had basically, like in our patio basically, I say basically way too much, but anyway, we had a patio covering that was hung up by metal chains or metal, not really chain, but a metal hook basically. Well, metal hook tore off from whatever spot it was exactly. I can't remember exactly where. And it was basically just swinging. And this was the one of two things that my family was afraid of happening during Ida. The other thing, the one that did happen is that once it came off, it was just flapping around, and it basically kept flapping and just completely busting a couple of our windows. Now, I do not know how. Now, maybe part of it is because the windows are double paned, but there was no water that got in the house. I don't know how that's the case, because if you actually went to that window before we just replaced it about a few weeks ago, if you actually went up to that spot, to that window, you can actually see some open spots. Like you can actually like put your finger through there and you're outside. So how there was no water that got in, I have no clue, and praise God for that. But we did have some busted windows, and I think that's really about it. Like, I can't tell you how fortunate we were that we specifically did not get that much damage, but most people in my neighborhood, and I would argue most people in the parish that I live in, had some roof damage, some very major, more major than others, but we were one of the few that somehow did not get any roof damage, and I'm very thankful for that. Some houses were just basically still destroyed. As of this video, this is 10 months, almost 10 months after the storm. Some people are still living in their trailers because they're still trying to repair their homes from Hurricane Ida. That's how serious this storm was. It's still really sad to kind of see what happened with Ida in the town that I grew up and still live in. You know, Hurricane Katrina did affect us, for sure. It did affect some houses, but not nearly as major as what Ida did. And so it's just, I really don't have words to describe this because it's just the fact that people are still dealing with their insurance companies. They're still trying to deal with repairing the homes, all that type of stuff. And it's just, I don't know. It just, again, I'm just kind of speechless, you know? And so one thing that I do remember also from Hurricane Ida is the fact that when we evacuated, it was basically like my whole family. My brother took his whole family and was kind of with me and my parents and whatnot. But I remember him and my sister-in-law trying to keep telling their kids, one of them being 9 years old, like how old I was when Katrina happened, that this is not a vacation, that people are being affected by these storms. And it really just kind of made me flashback to Hurricane Katrina. It kind of came full circle to a sense, you know, because it's like, it is hard to contextualize a situation like this when you're as young as 9 years old, and the other one was 4, or is still 4 still, I believe. Or at that time, it was actually 3. But anyway, it was just something that's like, it's really eye-opening when you go through situations like this. And what tends to happen is that in disaster situations like this, you have communities that just end up bonding together. They work together. You get people coming from different parts of the country to come out and help and support, do whatever they can for healing to happen. And this is one of the greatest things you can actually think when you really think about it. It's through these hard times that help people grow, that help communities grow. And that's why sometimes it's not necessarily the worst thing. Now, take away the whole hurricane factor right now. I'm just kind of going broad sense right now. It's very, very important to really actually, for lack of a better term, relish in opportunities when you have those challenging times, because it's those opportunities that help you grow as a person, that help you learn a few things about life. And so I think unfortunately we just live in a culture where we become too comfortable, where we try to avoid tough situations as much as possible, when it's those very situations that challenge us to become better people, to become a better son, a better daughter, a better parent, whatever it might be. All right. So I think that's really it. The only other thing I did want to mention that just popped in my head, again, this video, it's kind of just coming from my heart, because it's like, again, both of these storms did affect me personally, and I just really wanted to share this, considering we're going into hurricane season, which really goes from June to about mid-November, something like that. I just remember watching the news constantly in Florida when I was watching Ida hit the Gulf Coast in Louisiana, and just seeing how strong it was when it hit Louisiana, and then seeing the updates, like it seemed like minute by minute, it felt like, and I just remember Ida at one point, it was at night, it said in the town that's actually technically right next to me, that the levees were breached. And it was just like, oh no, are you telling me that the town that I grew up like going to school at, going like interacting with all the kids at, like a lot of people that I knew that stayed, like, are they going to be underwater? Are they going to be in trouble? Are they going to be okay? You know, like it was just insane to even think about. And luckily, it was just breach. It sounds weird to say that, but it's better than being broken, because being broken is kind of implied, like the levees don't work anymore. Basically, what a levee breach is just the water levels being higher than the actual levee itself, or something like that. So the water is basically kind of leaking over that levee to the other side. So that's basically what a levee breach is. So that's one thing I did want to mention about Hurricane Ida, and the main difference really is just that. And the weirdest thing with Ida, I'll say it like this: the weirdest thing with Ida is the fact that usually when hurricanes hit shore, whenever they go onto land, they immediately weaken significantly. Okay, like the wind levels go down, it might go a little slower, but it's weakened, so it's not nearly as bad. And that's actually what happened with Hurricane Katrina. With how devastating and powerful Katrina was, once it hit land, it immediately went from a Category 5 to a Category 3. When Ida hit, it was a Category 5, and it stayed like that for hours. Up until about when it hit, I would say maybe a little over an hour west of my area, which is really scary to think about, because that means that my area was sustaining about 120, 130 mile an hour winds at that time, which is just absolutely jaw dropping when you really think about it. And so Ida was it went out of the state of Louisiana, and it was still a Category 2. By the time it gets out of the state of Louisiana, usually hurricanes would be lucky to be a Category 1, but it was still a Category 2 at that time, which just shows how different and just how devastating Ida was, you know? So I think that's just the main thing. That's everything that I really had in my head and my heart that I really had to share personally about hurricanes. I know it was a longer video, but I did want to kind of raise awareness to hurricanes and just natural disasters in general. I know other parts of the country, they suffer earthquakes, especially out west. A lot of other places suffer tornadoes and whatnot. So that's just something that I think less and less people think about whenever those natural disaster hits, is all the ways people are affected by those storms. So I knew it was a lot longer video than expected, but I do think it was definitely well worth it just for you guys to hear my side of the story from like my experiences through hurricanes. And these aren't the only two. There's a lot of other hurricane experiences I can definitely talk about. Some of them actually kind of sounding fun, to be honest. So definitely leave in the comment section below if you want to hear some other hurricane stories and whatnot. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, like if you like this video, and subscribe if you are new. Peace.